Hello, students. This short little lecture here is specifically about helping you with your outlines and specifically relating to the unit of analysis. It seems to be a consistent difficulty connecting the research question, the research problem, to the dependent variable and then down to a unit of analysis. So think of it going down in tiers. You have your research problem, which is very general. As it gets more specific from your research problem, you go down to the dependent variable. So the dependent variable still does not have the specifics that it needs in order to be a really good unit of analysis. So you have to go down one more tier to actually come up with your unit of analysis. So that's what you need to keep in mind. On page 1 of your outline, you identify the research problem. On part 4 and 5, I believe, of your outline, you actually identify in separate parts of the exercise your dependent variable and your unit of analysis. They are not the same thing. If your dependent variable is the funding for Planned Parenthood, the amount of funding that Planned Parenthood gets, that is not your the funding for Planned Parenthood is not a unit of analysis because it's too generic. What you identified is a dependent variable, but what you're actually going to look at, are you going to look at the funding that Planned Parenthood got in dollars? Are you going to look at the states which have been defunded for Planned Parenthood? Are you going to look at the number of people which are being served by Planned Parenthood, which were being served in the previous scenario versus how many people Planned Parenthood will be able to service with their next one? So funding for Planned Parenthood is a dependent variable. Unit of analysis can be the people that they're able to serve with their money, their donations, and so it can break down much more specific. So let me look at another one of the examples which I have here. A research problem that is looking at obesity in children between the ages of 2 and 4 and the physical activity of children. So when you look at obesity, specifically obesity in children, that's very tempting to say, okay, that is a unit of analysis. We're looking for obesity in children. No, this is your dependent variable. You're analyzing the incident rate of obesity in children. So what you're looking at, it helps to break it down in X causes Y. So X leads to Y. So what is your independent variable? We know that Y is obesity in children. But what is your unit of analysis? All depends on, well, it's really going to depend on what your X is, your independent variable. Your independent variable of interest, if it's the activity level, the specific activity or the rate of activity or the hours of recess in a school program, then your dependent variable that you're going to look at still can be considered the obesity, the rate of obesity in children, but your actual unit of analysis will be can be the hours participation. So if the hours of participation over here as an independent variable, you have to look again to find out, you have to look at this more closely to find out what actually is the unit of analysis that's going to be measured in an outcome. So when you look at hours of participation, you actually have to figure out what am I going to measure as an outcome that could be dependent upon how many hours children participate in a week in physical activity. You would be the children's weight. So you would actually, the unit of analysis may be a child over 65 pounds. Or the number of children over 65 pounds. So you may be looking at children that have a very specific demographics assigned to them. And so you have to actually break it down and get very, very specific. You can't just say my unit of analysis is obesity in children. That's your dependent variable. What you're actually going to measure here becomes your unit of analysis. So get very specific on that. Another one here, okay, I've talked about funding of Planned Parenthood. Let me turn this a little bit more so I get my third Blackboard panel on here. The legalization of marijuana. Legalize MJ, marijuana. The impact of legalizing marijuana would have health benefits as a desirable outcome. So if we take legalizing marijuana as X, what does it lead to in Y? So we've got several different scenarios here that if we legalize marijuana, will crime go up? Will health go up? A sense of health, or would pharmaceutical use go down? So we would say sense of health might increase. So if you legalize, if more states legalize marijuana, so we're increasing the legalization of marijuana, will crime go up? Where our hypothesis would be a positive correlation. Would the sense of health and well-being go up? So we're arguing a positive correlation. Would the use of pharmaceuticals go down? So we're arguing a negative correlation. So we've got three different hypotheses here. So we're going to talk about hypotheses on there as well. But what are we actually looking at for the unit of analysis? We can't say our unit of analysis is the number of states that have legalized marijuana, because that's our independent variable. What's our dependent variable going to be? So the crime that we're looking at would be the number of arrests for possession of drugs, or would it be the rate of violent crimes that are drug related to gangs? So are we talking about gang crimes? Are we talking for the sense of health? How are we going to measure a sense of health for these people? So are you going to measure a scale of 1 to 5 for people who have chronic pain and have tried other mechanisms and then tries marijuana? We just saw an article this morning about autistic children on marijuana that does not have any of the TCP in it. And so the sense of well-being is going to be very dependent upon your study population. So this is what you need to consider here in all situations. What is your study population? In this case here, is your study population children over 65 pounds? So these are very, very important when you answer this question about the unit of analysis. Last one, work-life balance. Yeah, I'll put it on here. Work-life balance. Hours worked. Once again, tie it back to your research question. The research question, the research problem is going to dictate, remember back here, the research problem dictates what your dependent variable is, which dictates what your unit of analysis is. So in a work-life balance, when you look at your research problem, how do you balance work-life relationships when the amount of time spent at work outweighs the amount of time you spend at home? Are we looking at, for X causes Y, does more time at work in your 20s, 30s, and 40s translate to more time at play in your 50s, 60s, when you've still got good health, okay? So I think that may be the question that you're asking. The research problem is, if you put more hours of work in and you bank more money and you get better savings and you have a better retirement plan or a package set up when you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, can you retire early in your 50s or work far less arduously in your 50s and 60s and enjoy life more? So is it the short-term pain really rewards you in long-term gains? So then, now can you actually possibly see what the unit of analysis is? Remember, we are keeping separate the research problem from the dependent variable. We still haven't talked too much about what the dependent variable is here, but once you determine what the dependent variable is here, then you actually have to determine how you're going to measure it. So I hope that gives you an idea of how difficult it really is to get down to a unit of analysis. How do you define play? Let's just try an exercise here. I've got a few minutes left here on this. So let's think about this. And if I had a whole classroom here, this would be actually a lot more useful of an exercise if I had an entire classroom participating in thinking through this process, because it very much is a process of brainstorming. You've got to think very, very outside the box, so to speak, to come up with what the actual unit of analysis is that you're going to measure. So let's try and go with hours. So let's translate this to a 50-hour week. Do people who work 50 hours a week end up working less hours later in life? Okay, so you may analyze and look at people who can answer questions, a survey question of did you work more when you were in your 40s than you work now while you're in your 50s? And as you do this research, you may find that people who have really good work ethics in their 40s have no clue how to actually work less than they did when they're in their 50s and 60s. They just continue to work because that's all they've ever known. And then they don't really admit to themselves that I love work. So these are things that you're really going to have to look at in order to come up with a really good unit of analysis.